Chisholm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Minister. It's good to see you. I hope you will appreciate the fact that we on this caucus have 10 minutes to ask you questions. We have many questions that we would like to ask, so we're going to try to use our time quite judiciously and ask you to do the same if you wouldn't mind, with all respect. I'm going to share my time, Mr. Chairman, with Mr. Cleary. I want to start, if I may, Minister. As you know, there's been some considerable concern over proposed changes to the aquaculture regulations that deal with the release of toxic substances into the aquatic ecosystem. I'd like to ask you what your department has done to respond to these concerns, and when can we expect that these regulations will come into force?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. What the aquaculture activities regulations do actually provide more clarity and more consistency and transparency to aquaculture. They bring greater oversight, which includes the obligation to report all drug and pesticide use at aquaculture facilities. It also requires immediate notification if there is any wild fish mortality. But what it does not do, it doesn't allow aquaculture operators to use any drugs that they are currently not using. It does not approve any type of new drugs. These drugs are regulated by Health Canada, and so it doesn't allow for any new substance to be added to treatment regimes.
So I take from that the concerns of the 120 signatories to the letter that made representation to you last month didn't have any impact. And I guess the second part of my question was when those new regulations will come into force. I'm going to ask you if somebody would take a note of that. I'm going to ask you another question. Again, try to use my time wisely. The second question I wanted to ask you had to do with the DFO decided to open the herring fishery both last year and this year in the territories of the Nuchelna, Haida Gwaii, and the Halsek First Nations. In the face of their opposition to that decision to open that. As a result, there was some real conflict that was pending, and a lot of concern on the West Coast for how that was being handled. I wondered if you could please give us some assurance that your department is working with those First Nations as we speak, in effect, to make sure that this doesn't happen again next year.
Well, we are. I can assure you we are working with First Nations. DFO consults widely, not just with First Nations, but with all fishermen when it comes to species management and to develop fishing plans. At the end of the day, our decision is guided mostly by science, and so we share that science with the different groups. It's not just herring, it's for every species. We do a tremendous amount of consultation, and obviously we don't always agree at the end of the day. In this particular case, the science showed that we could actually open the fishery, and they gave us a number actually of quota that we could safely fish and not hurt the growth of the stock. We actually took a more conservative approach and only went to half that amount of quota. So as I said, we don't always agree, but our decisions are based on science.
My concern, Minister, is that in this particular case, in 2 years in a row, there either weren't the fish there, or it ended up being very serious potential of conflict. And it was almost like the First Nations recommendations were completely ignored, and I urge you to please ensure that that doesn't happen again. And let me go back, Madam Minister, and ask you about the oil spill response. We just had an incident, of course, in English Bay, but I take you back to a federal panel noted back in 2013 there are gaps in the government's oil spill response, and stated that timely response to a spill is a key factor in mitigating its effects. Then in October of 2014, it took 20 hours for a Coast Guard vessel to arrive on the scene off Haida Gwaii. You know, we've had this recent incident in English Bay, and I know that this affects not just the West Coast but the East Coast, and I wondered if you would assure members of this committee that in fact your department, in spite of the fact that there's been a reduction in the budget as it relates to this issue, your department is going to make sure that work is being done to provide better and the actual world-class response times that you proclaim.
Well, I just have to correct you that there is no reduction in the budget. The reduction that you see in the budget is a result of a project that was completed, and that was removal of the fuel from the Zelinsky off the coast of British Columbia. So that project was completed. What we have done over the last 3 years is we've added $183 million to that budget to build our world-class system, but I will ask the Commissioner of the Coast Guard to respond to that.
Thank you for the question. As the Minister noted, there has been no reduction to the Coast Guard environmental response budget, and there has been no reduction in our on-water response capacity in terms of response specialists. With regard to the Simishire incident, in fact, that was a very well executed response. Freighter off Haida Gwaii, not in Canadian waters, not in the 12-mile zone, was adrift, and we kept it off the rocks. And we kept it safe until an ocean-going tug, we're not tow operators, until an ocean-going tug could arrive to tow it into Prince Rupert. And so Coast Guard did exactly what it was expected to do. It arrived, assessed the situation, and saved that vessel from the rocks through some quite brilliant seamanship, in fact, in very, very difficult weather conditions. With regard to the Marathasa, the Coast Guard was on the scene within 20 minutes of a notification of sheen on the water, and worked from 5 o'clock Wednesday evening Pacific time well into the day, 24 hours straight, to get that vessel identified, to have the master admit it was his vessel, to skim the pollutant off the water, and then to boom the ship. And continued that work until today. We expect the Marathasa to leave Vancouver Harbour. And so I've been quite vocal that it was quite an extraordinary response by the Canadian Coast Guard, and I still believe that it was.
Thank you very much.